Sounds great. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to break my comments into twofold. One, the specific question you asked about the RFQ. And second, I want to pick up on some of the discussion as it relates to street elevation. So first, in terms of the RFQ, overall, great idea. I like it. I think this comprehensive, multidisciplinary approach is good. I'm going to share a couple comments in terms of scope, and then I would like to request to meet before the RFQ goes out and provide some additional input. But I do think we need what Commissioner Rosen-Gonzalez speaks to as that overarching vision of how we're going to live with water. I think we've talked a lot about street improvements, but we know we have some critical issues of seawalls, private properties from a couple angles. One, are there things we need to think about or do to support private properties? And then from a land development standpoint, are there other obligations, land development regulations that we should be thinking about? I'm always looking for the dollars and cents. What's this going to cost? Our master plan that lays out sort of where we proceed. Resident engagement throughout would be another element, and benchmarking, and I have two specific thoughts there. One, let's use our 100 resilient cities to really learn what others are doing. And then second, as we scope this out, you mentioned Climate Ready Boston. Norfolk did a very deep study with the Corps of Engineers. Let's look at their product, their end deliverables, and use those to guide the RFQ and say, hey, here are some sample deliverables. So I think this is a great idea. I've been calling hard for this type of multidisciplinary planning. I'm very enthused to see we're going to do it. Okay. So if that's part one, now I'm going to go to part two.
Okay, all right.
So part two, I'd like to talk a little bit about street elevation specifically. And we all know that sea level rise is a real threat. In fact, if you go back and look at local data, over the last 30 years, we've had about 6 inches of sea level rise. About 2 inches per decade is the data that I've seen. And we're anticipating, everyone believes we're going to have more. So this is a real issue. We've done some good things. One of the things, importantly, we've done is we've sort of marshaled the resources to get on with this issue. The mayor has now brought us a new term of reorientation. I looked up my Webster's dictionary. That means change direction, and we need real change. So I believe in reorientation. I believe in real change. I think the policy of road raising is one that needs real change. And I think it's one that's sort of getting in the way of a lot of good things that we're doing. We know the history, and you laid it out well, and I understand why we did what we did. And we now have real-life experience on which to make judgment. And I think what we have, with all due respect, is a policy that's flawed and very, very risky. And I'm concerned about it. And I'm concerned that it's slowing our progress down. So let me just sort of outline the reasons why I think we need to change this sooner rather than later. The first is the potential impact on private properties. And I think we've seen some real-life examples of that, whether it's just a drain that gets clogged, whether it's the aesthetics of a neighborhood, whether it's someone that had a 6-foot fence that now says he has a 3-foot fence. We've had some residents raise concerns of insurance. I don't think we have documented problems there, but the question has come up. Putting properties below grade is not good news. Just is not good news. The second is the impact on our neighborhoods. As we raise and elevate properties, we're losing green space. We have some needs to deal with the ADA recommendations because the sidewalk does not line up with the property, so now we have to find ways to move people around. And we haven't begun to talk about how we're going to address this in our historic neighborhoods. These projects have become long and complicated. I don't envy the task that you guys have been given, and you've been doing an admirable job to get on with it. But they're long, they're painful, and part of it is because we've asked you to go property by property and harmonize. For example, in Palm and Hibiscus, it's about 100 little engineering projects. We're out there, you've got residents you're trying to harmonize. I think this has been an incredibly difficult process, not only for residents, but I think the street raising has made it extraordinarily so. I want to talk about the dollars and cents. First off, the street elevation is costing us money. Obviously, that costs money and time. But also, I worry about the impact on longer-term property values. I don't know that we know what the impact is of having properties below street level, but we're counting on our property base to fund these projects. So we have to be very careful that anything we do could have an adverse impact. I don't believe we have the support of our residents, whether we heard from West Avenue, whether we heard from Miami Beach United, whether we've heard from Bayshore, we had North Bayshore as well. And finally, I think it's very important in terms of our communication, and Roy, I think you said it, but this street raising was meant for the longer term. We did our projection, that's the longer term, and we want to protect our infrastructure. But the street raising is not what we need today to address our flooding. Our one-way valves, our pipes, our pumps with backup generators, I think are serving us very, very well. What I fear is this element of our policy, which had some logic. We'd go into a neighborhood, we should do it all once, and we're getting ready for 30-plus years out, has now become a loggerhead, and our residents have lost their support and confidence, and I'm afraid it's stopping us from doing stuff we need to do. We need to address the sewers. We need to address the pipes. We need to address the pumps. So I think we've had enough evidence with this. I think we need to have a mature view that as we go through a process like this, that we're going to learn the policy of 3.7 NAVD, unless there's so-called hardship, I do not think is serving us well. I think it will continue to be a problem, and I would like us to find a way as soon as possible to change this course so that we can get on with the other elements of the program which are adding value.
Okay.